Well, without much further ado, thank you all for joining us today for what I'm sure is going to be an amazing webinar. My name's Dave Yoon. I'm the head of community here at Faceware, and you've joined us for our latest webinar series. So every month, Faceware hosts industry professionals to talk through their expertise in facial animation or motion. We also talk to notable clients of ours as well who are working on a unique project that we want to shed some light on. If you've missed any of these, including our live demonstration of our next generation facial processing tool called Faceware Portal, you can find them all on our YouTube channel at Faceware Tech. But that's like old news. Let's talk about this week. This week we have video game animator and all-around nice guy, Tom Engelhardt. Tom excels in hand key animation, face solving, and mocap animation for game cinematics. Tom, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me. This will be fun.
Yeah, let's definitely get right into it. So Tom, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and the type of work that you typically do?
Sure, yeah. So I'm an animator for video games. I started off with hand key and mostly do cinematics, but then more recently got into, like with God of War, got into facial animation and mocap. My time at, I did Crash Bandicoot 4 at Brazen Animation, and I did God of War RAGNARÖK at Sony PlayStation, and then at Frame Machine I worked on some things I can't talk about yet, but I did do more mocap and dabbled into gameplay as well, and so I'm about ready to start a new adventure pretty soon, so that's pretty exciting.
That's right. And in addition to your professional work, it seems like you have like quite a like strong community presence as well.
Yeah, you're talking about like on social media? Just
your social media. You seem like an all-around helpful guy. I feel like there's a lot of people that reach out specifically to you, and you really get in the weeds with them.
Yeah. I try my best to try to help people out because that's how I got started. Was I was just like them, trying to just reach out to anybody for help, and I love that about the animation community, that people just want to help, it seems. I came from a music background, and when I was in music trying to make it, it wasn't as helpful. But with animation, everybody seems to just want to help each other out, and so that's what I want to do too. Whenever I have some free time and I feel motivated to like make some tutorial videos and stuff like that, I try to do that. You may have seen I've done a whole bunch since the beginning of the year. So I was kind of like a New Year's resolution. I want to make a whole bunch of these, start a TikTok channel and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully that's been helpful. I've gotten some pretty good feedback from that.
Well, thank you for giving back. That's actually how I came across you, and we started chatting was actually through those TikToks. So I personally am grateful, and hopefully we'll give back some more info today during this chat. Let's get right into it, Tom. Right. Can you give us a little summary on what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Faceware Retargeter and how it can be used for the facial animation in like video game cinematics. Because a lot of times in the cinematics, there are so many frames. These shots are so huge, and if you try to hand key them, you can't do it. And you can't afford, first of all, to hire that many animators to hand key all the facial that needs to be done for the entire game. So a tool like Faceware Retargeter is a godsend. And so, that's what we're going to be talking about today, is just kind of how to use it. With the limited time we have, I can't get into all of the polish and details and stuff like that, but I can at least show the basics on how to get it started.
Well, I'm excited to see your workflow, and I know a lot of people would love to see actual button clicks. So Thanks for sharing today, Tom. I'll let you take it away.
All right, sweet. Let's take a look at my demo reel first, and then we'll get started, just so you can see a little bit of some of the work I've done.
Love it.
Let's see why my sons fell to you. You enlist lesser version of you, but I am not my sons. And your voice, all others have plans for this.
Yes, the kind we keep shut, we have to go through. whistles and fix this before some putz with a big evil plan and a bigger ego does something monumental.
Emperor Palpatine says, "Die, Jedi," and start to electrocute in the loop.
And how do you intend to stop me?
Look into my eyes. You tell me.
Of course. The Regenerator has capabilities beyond your...
Huh. So, what you're collecting? Crystals?
You seem like a calm and reasonable person. Are you? A calm and reasonable person?
If the moment calls for calm.
I'd say the moment calls for calm. Yeah.
Oh,
You're on 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
There we go. See if I can. All right, I'm going to switch back to my screen. Cool. Yeah, so if you can see from my demo reel, it's like just a broad range from cartoony, hand-keyed stuff to more realistic stuff. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So yeah, can you see my screen? Everything's looking good?
looking great.
All right, perfect. Let's go. So what is retargeting or face solving? Some people call it that. So it's, using this software to help out. It's the use of tracking software to generate convincing in-betweens and share poses over a large range of frames. It must be followed up with a keyframe animator to clean up, push, and polish. And that's just my thoughts on it, that it must be followed up with that, just because Faceware Retargeter, it gets you maybe 75, 80% of the way there, and then you need to go in and push it and polish it, add some more character to it. You can add in animation layers. You can go in and adjust the curves and all that kind of stuff. But it gets you most of the way there. At least you have a solid base for your animation. So there's software for the tracking. So with Faceware Retargeter, you have to first use Faceware Analyzer. An analyzer kind of goes in, and you have like a static face cam, so like an HMC, a head mount camera that the actor's using when they're acting it out, the mocap actor. And so what's cool about with Faceware is you don't need all the dots, the tracking dots. I mean, it helps if you have the tracking dots on their face when you're doing it. But if you just have a static camera of you talking, you can use Analyzer to go in, and you see in this animated GIF here, how you can kind of just move those little tracking markers throughout the shot, and you kind of go through, and then you hit train and track, and Analyzer kind of takes all of that data, it puts it into a file that then you can bring into Faceware Retargeter. And so, right here I mentioned you need a static face cam video footage, or with or without the face markers. You import the footage into Analyzer. You go ahead and track and analyze the footage, and then you finalize it and bring that file into Faceware Retargeter. And so what's neat about this is the tracking data is not necessarily moving the rig. So when you bring in, and you'll see this, I'll open it up in a demo. When you bring that data into Maya, this is like Faceware Retargeter is a Maya plugin that you bring into Maya. When you bring in that data, the rig isn't moving at all. So it's just that data is stored in there to help you out. And so, like I said on this slide here, it says, like Disney's 9 Old Men, you create the key poses and the breakdowns, and Retargeter becomes your in-betweener. So that's kind of how I like to look at it. So the animator actually has to go in and find the extremes, when the jaw's wide open, when the mouth is wide, you go in and you pose those out. And then find all of those key poses. So you want to use as few poses as possible. So just like the 9 Old Men used to do with hand-drawn, they weren't drawing all those frames. They were only drawing the key poses, the extremes, and then the breakdowns. Then they would draw out timing charts to where they could have some in-betweener come in and follow their timing chart and just in between their poses. And that's exactly what Retargeter does. It's kind of an already made timing chart based on the video that you tracked, and it will in between all of your poses that you have created, which is really neat, and that's why I like it. It's very different from cleaning up mocap. That when I was first doing this, I thought that's what I would be doing, is cleaning up facial mocap, but it's not that at all. You have a lot of control over what's happening. Why use Retargeter? Well, volume. I mentioned this before. If your project has way too many sequences that have too many frames, in God of War, some shots had 10,000 frames, and maybe you have to do a first pass in a week. There's no way you're going to hand key that, And when I was first learning it, we weren't using Retargeter at Sony. We were using something else proprietary, but it's very similar. When I was first learning this type of animation, I was like, I didn't like it. I'm like, oh gosh, I could hand key this so much faster, until I saw the volume of how much we had to do. And I'm like, okay, I need to learn this. And it probably took about 3 weeks of training and practicing and all that kind of stuff before my mind finally clicked and understood exactly how this was working. So it is a different mind frame. If you learn it now, so the next bullet point, learning it now, before you get hired at a place that uses this software, learn it now. You'll get ahead of the pack, and it's more likely you'll get hired, because a lot of times it's hard to find people that already know how to do this kind of animation. And so then the company's going to have to spend money and time training people on the job. So if you already know this, you're saving that company, that studio, you're saving them money and time. So you'll get ahead of the pack. And then if this is used well, it can be used poorly, but if it's used well, it can give you more realistic and natural movement. Just like using mocap well. That can give you more natural and realistic movement, but the same applies there. There are some who, if you don't really know how to use this, it's not going to look as good. And so it's really important to try to learn the best practices on how to use it. So let's talk about that. Best practices. Fax-based rigs are the best to use, but they're not always available. But fax-based, if you don't know what that is, go ahead and look up FACS. melindaozel.com. You can check out her website. She talks a lot about it. She's a great resource to have. There's lots of resources out there, but fax is pretty much based on the muscle movement. So you're not really, an animation, facial animation. We're taught facial shapes. It's like when you're saying an M, it looks like this, and you're saying an O, it looks like this. It's not necessarily that. It's more based on where are the muscles moving, which muscles are moving, and it's like the motion based, which makes it more realistic, because that's how we talk. We don't automatically blend to an O shape and then blend to a smile or whatever it is. And so if you have a fax based rig, the controls are named after those muscles, and it can really help you in the retargeting to make it feel more natural and stuff. And it also helps with like not all rigs are based, I'll get into this later too, but not all rigs are completely the same as a character, as the actor. And so a lot of times when you do something like with mocap, if you've ever done mocap before, maybe the actor's a different size, a different body type, and then you bring it in and you apply it to a rig that's a different size and different body type. It doesn't necessarily match completely. And so then it's hard. You got to do some tweaks to try to make it fit better. And the same thing is with facial animation. So if you animate fax-based, you can get a better match because it's not necessarily based on the shapes and the sizes and all that kind of stuff. That's in relationship to itself. So always compare to neutral is the next one, and that kind of helps you with that. You find a neutral pose on your face, and then as you're creating new poses, and I'm bad at this, I always have to remind myself, compare it to neutral, because it can be like the game of telephone where, if you just continue to add poses and you're further and away from neutral, it can get further and further away from being on model, and all of a sudden you're off model. So right here's what I mentioned, unless the rig was based on the actor, it doesn't always translate 1-to-1. So it's relationship based. So relationship to neutral. How far does this corner go from neutral? How far does the jaw go from neutral? All that kind of stuff. Because, there were some shots on God of War where we had, where sometimes they had a different actor. Like, maybe that actor isn't available for the mocap shoot. And so, they did a substitute, but this rig was based on this other actor. So you need to know how to do that. You start big, just like any animation. Start with the big, broad strokes and then add the details later. And that helps mainly because the next bullet point, you're laying a foundation for future poses. As you start with like just some jaw movements, as you apply that to the entire shot, then when you create a new pose, you already have those jaw movements roughly in the right spot, and then you build onto that. Try to use as few poses as possible. There's something called like a 20 pose pass, or it depends on how big the shot is. But, if you have a target that you're shooting for of like, hey, I want to try to solve this in 20 poses, then that's the best way to do it. Cause then you're going to be more selective in what poses you choose. And you're not going to be all like, well, I'll just throw in a pose here. I'll throw in a pose there. You really want to be selective. Try not to create poses that are too similar. And that's why you need to be selective, because you might, have one pose towards the beginning of the shot that looks exactly the same as a pose towards the end of the shot, but you posed it slightly different at the end. When it solves it in between, there's going to be some jitter because it's confused. Wait, which pose should I use? So try to use as few of those as possible. And then after adding a pose, always update and retarget. To see how it was applied. I feel like that's the biggest thing about using software like this is it's troubleshooting. It's trying to figure out how is this software interpreting the information I'm giving it. And the only way you can know that is by retargeting. You hit retarget, it applies it to the whole thing. It's kind of like play blasting. And I know some people think play blasting is a waste of time. Well, if you have a real-time software, it is a waste of time to play blast. But if you don't, it's not a waste of time to play blast and see how it looks, right? And because if you're problem solving at that point, you're looking for what's off. And that's the same thing with the retargeter. Just hit retarget, check it out, see how it's applying, and then go in and add another pose, update, retarget, and then it's gonna apply it to the whole thing and then look and see how it used it. And that's the best way to do it, because you could sit there and put in a whole bunch of different poses, and sometimes maybe those extra poses you put in were redundant, and now you messed it up and you confused it. So the fewest amount of poses as possible. So with that said, let me just show you what this looks like. So we are in Maya, and this is a plugin called Faceware Retargeter right here. And, it has its own little menu here where you can load it. Under Performance is where you open up that file that you got from Analyzer. And this, all this demo, all this stuff was free downloads on Faceware's website. So if you want to try this yourself, get a free demo. I think there's a 30-day trial. And then you can download resources. They have these facial rigs and these HMC videos and all that kind of stuff. They even have the data already done for you. So if you want to open up a file that's already been done and kind of look under the hood and see how they did it, you can do that too. So for this one, I already did just some, basic brow movements, eye movements, and then I'm going to show you how to do some mouth movements. But it's broken out into those sections where you have the brows. You work on the brows separately, then the eyes, which also include like the cheeks and stuff. And then you have the mouth, which also includes like the nose area and everything. So the mouth and the jaw and all that kind of stuff. So you kind of solve those in those three different sections: brows, eyes, and then mouth. So you'll see here, if I just scrub through, I already did basic eye movement and brow movement. And this is I only put in, like if we're on the brows, I'll select the controls there. I only put in 7 poses, but then when I hit retarget, it goes in and kind of bakes it down, and it finds other parts of the animation where it can reuse those poses that I put in. And so it kind of in-betweens the poses I put in. And that was only 7 poses. It's not It's not the greatest. You see there's some stutter and stuff like that. But that's as far as I got just for this demo. And for the eyes, the eye direction, you can see I got down the basic eye direction with, that was like 17 poses, right? And I usually start, just the order of operations is I usually start with the eye direction, just because that's kind of the simplest, and that kind of helps you too with when you're working with the rest of the face. By the time you get to the mouth, you want the eyes and the brows looking okay, like just kind of in the range of where it should be, just so you can still try to make everything work together, because everything has to relate to each other eventually. So yeah, let's go ahead and just get into the mouth. So yeah, the order of operations was eyes, then brows, and then the mouth. So what I have for the mouth, let me select the mouth control here, is right now I scrubbed through and found a pose where the mouth kind of looks neutral. And I decided on frame 13, right? And so you're just going to, like I said, you start with broad stroke. So I'm on neutral right here. And then what I'm going to do is I usually look for an open jaw, like where it's probably open. So it opens here, and then it opens again here. So let's see, which one do I want to go to? Let's do this open jaw, because this open jaw also has a wide mouth. So I'm going to go ahead, and what you do is you just click on add. And now I got a pose here, and I can just say open. You can write in a little description here. And when you double click on these, you can hop between the poses, right? And so now I can go ahead and just pose this out. So I'm going to, over here on this rig, a lot of the controls are in the channel box. So get used to working in the channel box with a lot of these rigs. What I like to do is highlight the channel I'm working on, and then I'll middle mouse drag so I can change the values like this, right? And then you can change the speed of it right here. You just click on this a few times, it changes the speed. So if you want it fast or slow, that's what you do. So then I just try to get this pretty close. You know, you want to be able to see the teeth. So I'm going to go ahead and raise the lips. We have upper lip, center. Let's go ahead and raise that up. So I want to see the relation between the teeth to know how far open the jaw needs to be. Oh, I did lower. Upper and upper. Okay. And then we're going to go a little bit wider. Let me see if this one does wide. Yeah, I can do it from here. And we can also, on this rig, you have corners. You know, we can open up the corners a little bit more. Or there's a dimpler. The dimpler, so you see here I have not just the head mount camera with the facial rig on one side, but then I also want to look at it from the side, because you can very easily just get stuck at looking straight on, and then you're going to miss how it looks in depth, because when you're putting this in the video game, they're not just going to be looking at it from the front, right? And so it's also good if the game gives you a master cam of what it's going to look like in the game. If it's a cinematic, you're going to get a master cam where you can kind of flip and see what does it look like to camera. But if this is like in game, you want it to look good from any direction, because you don't know where the camera's necessarily going to be. Yeah, we can mess around with the dimpler. I'm not going to get too into detail here, but I know it's going to take a while.
I'm sure the audience appreciates the detail.
All right, sweet. Center down. Uppers down. So it doesn't have to be perfect right now, as we're just creating these. Let me do them here. Okay. As we're doing these key poses, doesn't have to necessarily be perfect. And you see this rig, the lip is kind of going in into the teeth. So you just want to look out for stuff like that. I think that's the dimpler. Yeah, it's with how the lips are right there. So we can always just mess around with also pulling the lips a little further away from the teeth. If your rig has that, you can go lower, forward, and back. All right, so we can get a little bit further away. But I don't, for this pose, it looks like they're kind of pressed against the teeth, so I don't want to do that for this one. So anyways, let's just say that one's pretty good. The jaw could probably come open slightly more. Yeah, we'll just say that's good. Then you hit update. I'm not going to retarget yet. Usually I want about 3 poses before I hit retarget, and then we're always going to retarget. So let's, we're finding extremes. So now I want to find a spot where the teeth are together, right? So I'm just going to scrub. Teeth are together here. And you want to make sure it's an extreme. So like when you're looking for like when there's a change of direction. So when it's at its most extreme before it starts to change back a different way. So you see those lips are going out. And then the teeth are starting to come open right here. So I'm trying to find that spot where it's most extreme. So teeth are together here. I'm going to add a pose here. I'm just going to write it TT for me so I know that's teeth together. You don't need to label all your poses, but especially if they're like your tent posts for what you're going to go back to and compare things to, you'll want to name those for sure. All right, so then I want the lips open. So let me go ahead and actually, to get those lips the same, I'm going to go back on what I said. I'm going to see if it's going to let me do two poses. I'm going to see if it's going to let me retarget, just so I can get those lips close to where they were. Cool. So now when we're on frame, was that frame 123? There it is. Okay. Now I'm going to add it. So you see how that got me a little bit closer. Lips aren't exact, but at least now I can see the teeth, and it's something that's in relation to what I already did. So let's go ahead and close these teeth. They're not completely closed. The jaw isn't completely closed, but the teeth are together. It looks like on this one the jaw's a little forward. So I'm going to hold off on that because I don't want the jaw to go crazy yet. I'm just going to focus on up and down. And then this is teeth together. Whoops. Teeth together. Let's get the mouth pose open more. Let's go ahead and drag these corners. Actually, before I do that, let's do upper lip. And then once I'm done kind of posing this one out, I'm going to compare it to how the other one looks, because you don't pose in a silo. Lower left. And it looks like, you see, when you see these muscles on the neck, that means she's using her stretcher muscle. So stretcher is kind of pulling down the bottom corners. So it depends on the rig you have, if they have a stretcher control, if it works correctly. This one doesn't. It kind of does it a little bit, so I'm going to use it slightly. So you just got to kind of get to know the rig and see if the controls are working the way you would expect. Okay, so that might be, and then you see how her mouth is kind of off to the side a little bit. I'm going to hold off on that too. Certain details like that, we can always add in later. I don't want it to be too confused, and I would almost rather do that on a layer afterwards, because I want this to be as simple as possible. Some people differ on that. I probably will, if there's ever jaw left and right, I might do that. But let's update this, compare it to the other one, make sure it looks like it relates, and then retarget. So now we should at least have some jaw movement throughout. It's not going to be exact. It's interesting at the end there, she talks with her jaw together, which is difficult to do with software like this, but if you pose it right, it can be done. So let's go ahead and now make sure that this open jaw is open wide enough. And it's also off to the left a little bit. So this will be like an open left, or screen left, her right. So I'll say open right then. And the jaw, a lot more open. It's over, whoops. Yeah, it's more closed like that. And then jaw left, right. A little bit off to the side. And then the lower lips, lower. It's probably mainly just the center. You're always looking for, like with the teeth, where the lip is in relationship to the gums. And hopefully your camera is the same angle as this camera too. You might have to adjust how you're looking at the rig depending on where the camera is on the HMC, the head mount camera. So I'm going to bring those corners in more. It's not going to be exact, but let's try that. Retarget. And then usually what I'll look for too is like ooze. So something where the mouth is tight and then where the mouth is wide. But I already got some wide mouths, so I'm probably going to go for an ooh shape next. So we have ooh here. So she says, what was that? I don't know, you guys probably can't hear the audio, but she says, what was that? Right here. What was that? So that ooh on what? Right here. Let's go ahead and add a pose. And then there are some blend shapes on here to where we can kind of get an O or an ooh shape. So we can try to use that. But it looks like that one also makes the lips a little bit wider. So maybe pucker might be better for this one. We can get the lips a little bit closer. I'm going to call this one ooh. Normally I would stay away from kind of combining O or pucker or all that kind of stuff if it's like fax based. This one isn't necessarily fax based, so I'm gonna have to just kind of use the controls I have. So pucker would normally be more of lips together, pucker like you're pucking for a kiss. O or ooh, there's a bigger, wider mouth. Funneler is more like a duck lip, where it's really, and if you go full funnel, usually it almost looks like a box. And if you go like full ooh, it's more like a round circle. That's kind of how I think of it. So if I push these lips together, let's see, I'm going to bring the lower lip up. Lower, lower, lower. Bring the upper lip down. Just update that for now. Ooh. Let's compare it to neutral and just see. There's neutral. I want to see like up and down. Are the lips going up higher or are they about the same? Looks like the mouth corners are going down for that. What was that? So I can bring these mouth corners down. Maybe not so far on the right side. We can update that, compare it to neutral. Might be a little bit wider mouth. But I don't want it to look like a smile, so. And then let's look and see what it looks like from the side. Compare it to neutral. Ooh. So that could be a little bit further out, those lips. So let me bring upper and lower. We can kind of go out more. Oh, let's retarget. So we have what was that? So you see with just, what is that, 5 poses right now? We can almost tell she's saying what was that. Right? Which you can start to see the value of this software once you get into, I mean, this shot's only 300 frames, but like I said, 10,000 frame shot. Man, if you can put in 5 poses, and then you not only get what was that looking better, but you also get other phrases looking better too, right? So what I'll start to do now is, so you're just looking for the extremes of what's not working. And so I'm going to just continue to scrub and see what's not working. So I know right here the teeth are coming together when they shouldn't. That's not extreme, right? I will fix that later. That'll be a pose I'll add later. I'm looking for the most extreme problems. So there, see that big funnel? That's a funnel right there. So like, what is that? Frame 251. We'll add a frame there. We'll add a pose there. So you see here how our lips are sticking out more like a duck. And this is, we don't have any poses yet that look like that. And so this is definitely one that I want to make sure I have a pose there, right? And so this is like a teeth together funnel. TT fun. So let's put the jaw right. So we're going to bring the teeth together. Oops. Teeth together. And then we're going to get the lips looking right. So let's go ahead and I'm going to add some, probably get rid of the pucker and add some funneler on this one. And let's see what this rig does with funnel. So it's not exact. So we'll have to tweak some things. So I want her left upper lip needs to be higher. And it depends on your rig. Sometimes you'll want to do this from the nose, right? And so you might have a nose wrinkler control on your rig where when you bring that up, it also brings the lip up. And so it just depends on your rig. On this one, the nose wrinkler doesn't necessarily control the lip. So I'm just going to do it from the lip control. And then I can also add some nose wrinkler in if I want to. But that's, more of a fine detail. But it's something to think about. If your rig does control, if the nose wrinkler does control the lip, you don't want to move the lip and the nose wrinkler, and now the lip just moved up twice, and you're kind of counter animating it or double animating it. All right, so we have that lip up. On that side of the lip up, the lower, we see a lot of gums on her lower lips, or on her lower teeth. So let's do all the lower lips. Unfortunately, I guess I don't have the texture for her gums here. So you just want to see the gums are right there. They're not red for some reason, but that's okay. It looks like she probably still has some stretcher, so the stretcher controls on these corners. And it looks like it already added some stretcher for us, so that's good. Yeah. And then probably from this control, I don't want to go as wide. So you see that there is some counter animating going on in this on this rig, and I'm trying my best to avoid it. Upper lip, funneler. Now that I did all that, let me just adjust funneler. I'll remember 3.9 is where we're at now. Yeah, I think that's where we want to be. So I'll just type that back in, 3.9. What else can we do? Maybe a lip roll. Let's see. Upper lip roll might give us a little bit more. It's hard to tell. Let me update this so I can compare. Compare to neutral. I'm going to have to just bring those lips a little further out myself. So we'll use this forward back. Update. Lower lip roll. It's not working exactly the way I'd like it to. That's okay. All right, this corner is coming out a little further. Might be stretched out more. Let's see. Okay, let's just try that. Compare it to neutral. I'm going to also compare it to other poses. I want to see, because this was a wide pose, and to see how narrow this one goes, I think I still need those corners out a little bit more. So I'm going to do that from the corner controls. Because I don't want it to be too narrow just yet. And so you see why it's important to compare, because everything needs to work in context with each other. All of the poses need to relate to each other. All right, so we got that crazy funnel shape, and let's see if that actually helps out with some other poses around that. So it pretty much just did that one. So it's doing this, and we can probably get that P soon. We'll get that P. But this one, where that lip goes up on the other side, which is also a nose wrinkler thing, that would be a good pose to get in as well. So let's find the extreme of that. Maybe right there. Add a pose. Teeth together. Say teeth together. Right lip up. Jaw first. Teeth together. Then her right upper lip is higher on this one, and it should be kind of a little bit. Let's get rid of pucker. You always want to look for residuals too. If there's a control that you used in the past that maybe you don't want on this one, so like, yeah, I just now noticed presser is on, and I might want to check that on some of these other ones. Let me check on the funneler. Presser's on. There we go. Things that might be counter animating. It's hard to keep track of a whole bunch of things, and that's why you don't want to use too many controls. All right, so we got that side up. This one, for left upper lip, It can be up a little bit. Lower lips should still be down so we can see some gums underneath. So let's go lower. Lower, lower, lower. Let's make sure the funneler is where it needs to be. And funneler on this rig actually makes the mouth more narrow, so you kind of have to counter animate that with the corners if you don't want it to be narrow. Retarget. And the thing you have to fight too with this is a lot of times we're taught as animators to exaggerate everything, but if you're going for more natural movement, a more real movement, first try to get it looking right subtly. So don't try to over exaggerate what you see. You have to kind of fight that urge. Let's keep it simple and small first, because you can always push it later. But it looks really weird if you try to push it now using Retargeter. Right. So that's not reading as that left or her right lip going up. So I'm going to, now I know I need to push it a little further, that right lip. So speaking of pushing, start small, and then you can add more. So this is her right upper lip. Needs to be higher. Let's try that and retarget.
And Tom, let me just butt in here to say, if for the attendees, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them in the questions box. We'll definitely try our best to get through to through them at the end, and if there's anything that's outstanding, we can reach out as well. Sorry, Tom.
No, that's great. No problem. That's good. You covered up a mistake I made where I didn't have to talk about it, so that's good.
There we go.
We'll pretend it didn't happen. There we go. So I'm trying to push that so that right upper lip movement is looking okay. It also looks like the mouth is moving up there towards the end. I'm going to save that for later. But you see how the mouth is down and then the mouth is kind of up here. It's kind of the... some rigs have a chin raiser that also moves the lip when the chin raiser comes up. So that's a muscle you have to think about. This rig, for some reason, the chin raiser doesn't control the lip too. So I will have to kind of adjust that with the lower lip. But that, I'll come to that pose later if I feel like it's an extreme problem. So now that we've retargeted again, we're just going to keep scrubbing. You could play blast if you want, or if your computer can handle more of a real-time type of playback, you can try that. Just always looking for the biggest extreme problem. So it might be that ooh, or maybe a P. We haven't done many contacts yet. Let's do the P, because an extreme contact is important. So for the P, and yeah, if you ever need to stop me with questions, go for it. I can do this also while I'm answering questions. So.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, how's your multitasking skills? Well, while we get to P, this is just some basic ones.
P break.
Do you have to configure the plugin first so that it knows what controllers you want it to use? That's a question we had in the chat. I think the question there is how did you map the controls from the rig to Retargeter?
Yeah,
so if you just briefly speak to that.
Sure. There's a thing called character setup, and for each character, for each rig you have, you need to go ahead and create a character setup. And so what that does is just maps out. So it says browse. I don't know if I'm going to mess up my thing if I try to open it now. But yeah, I don't want to mess up what I have going on, but it'll say browse, and then you can go ahead and select the controls, go through your rig and say, whenever I'm putting keys on browse, I want all of these controls to be factored in. And then you do the eyes. I want all these controls factored in for the eyes. And then the mouth, same thing. I want all these controls factored in for the mouth. So that way, when you're posing, and then you have to remember or write down or know when you're working on each control, which one you grouped it to. And I know I got messed up once before because I wasn't sure if I grouped the cheeks to the eyes or to the mouth. Usually the cheeks are to the eyes, mainly because you have that mask area. So like they work together. So like when the brows are coming down too, you want the cheeks to come up, or if you're squinting, a lot of times you might want to bring the cheek muscles up. And so yeah, character setup is where you set that up.
Nice.
Yeah, and you only need to set that up once per rig, really, so you can always just recall that every time. So like when I'm opening up performance here, I say open, here's the character setup file right here. So I just go back, it's an XML. So it saves all that information for you right here, and then you bring in the analyzer file here.
Yeah, and another question we had in the chat is, does the retargeter only use controls you move while making the poses, or will it use all of them to achieve the desired shape?
It won't use a control you haven't touched yet. And so and that's why you kind of want to use as few controls as possible, because if you start to touch one and you only touch that control for one pose, then it will try to find other spots to use that pose. But then on all your other poses that you didn't use that control, it might pop, to nothing, because, well, it will pop to nothing because you didn't use that control on that pose. So, yeah, you kind of want to figure out what controls you're going to use for the whole thing. If there's certain controls you're not going to use yet, you just kind of want to keep track of that. Usually there's primary controls, secondary controls. And if your rig has that labeled, that's nice. Sometimes it'll be labeled secondary for you in the channel box.
I think Anna actually had a really interesting question. In your working facial animation, Tom, what parts do you find most challenging? Why, and how do you work around it? Just as thanks for the showcase.
Yeah, no problem. So just the most challenging in working with facial, like with retargeting, is that the question?
Yeah, I guess for the purposes of this convo, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so the most challenging is especially when like action sequences, someone's moving their head around and all that kind of stuff, because you're reliant on the head mount camera. And if that's moving around, your data you're getting a whole bunch of jitter and shake. And, Faceware Retargeter Analyzer doesn't necessarily know, like, is the head moving, or because it's not staying still on the camera. And so a lot of times you'll get that data into your shot. And so usually what I'll do when that happens is, and what I've been taught to do is at some points just kind of ignore that and realize I can clean that up in the curves afterwards, because that's something I forgot to mention. Retargeter is not something you're going to be using the entire time through the shot. You want to stay in it as long as possible until it looks really good, as good as you can get it with retargeter. Then at a certain point you close it out, turn it off, and then you're hand keying, like you're going into the curves, you're fixing things. A lot of times, rather than like deleting keys and trying to smooth things out, if you do that, it looks a little bit too 3D animation instead of like realistic. A lot of times you can just squash, scale down the curves. If it has a lot of jitter and stuff, just scale it down, because you might want some of that dirt and that grit in there. Because like if it's an action scene, maybe a little bit of that is fine, but you just don't want the face shaking all over the place. So yeah, that's definitely the most challenging, is when you get action scenes and shaky cameras.
Yeah, I hear you. If you want to reduce your shake, we do offer the Mark IV, which is an excellent flagship HMC that that reduces a lot of that shake. But I think this is a good transition to this chat, this question that we got from Maxim. I think it talks about like the polish versus the retargeting, like the time you spend. So, how much time do you dedicate to the polish after retargeting? Is that the bulk of your work, or is it the retargeting and setting up the poses?
Yeah, it depends on the show, the game, really, and the workflow and stuff. But usually, let's say I had a week to do a shot, I would probably spend the first day and a half, 2 days in Retargeter, really getting it good. But it just depends on the details. If there's more dialogue, I'll stay in it longer, because dialogue, when there's dialogue, you're going to have to add in more breakdowns. So just the extreme poses aren't going to work as well. So you'll have to add in more breakdowns to get the flow of like the mouth corners and all that kind of stuff. If there's less dialogue, probably a day and a half in Retargeter, and then I can spend like the rest of the week going. But it also depends on my lead, my supervisor, how long they want me to stay in it until they feel like it's ready. That's usually how it'll work. Is your lead or your supervisor will go, okay, I think you've taken this as far as it can go with this tool. Now go into animation phase. So it just all depends. But like I said, if there's more dialogue, I might spend exactly like half the time in Retargeter and then spend the rest of the time cleaning it up. But yeah.
Great. We had a really interesting one from Matthew here. Do you use prune spacing, smooth features when retargeting, or do you try to get the tracking side as accurate as possible so they aren't as necessary?
Yeah, I try to I try not to use that. You can use it like if you find like you have very common problems over and over and over again, that's when you can start tweaking that stuff. You don't want to use like smoothing for eye darts and stuff, and so you want to figure out what part of the face needs it. Brows could probably use a little bit more smoothing. But yeah, I think it just all depends on the rig and how the data. I'd like to see the data rather than just using some blanket statement of these are the settings I use. I'd rather see how's the data, how's this rig handling this data, and then adjust those settings accordingly.
A lot of positive chatter in the chat based off that response. So yeah, what a pro, Tom! You're such a pro. And I think that's a good transition to some rig talk that we've had. Question from Isaac: does Retargeter work with any rig you want, or does it need to be rigged a certain way in order to make it work?
Yeah, I'm not a tech animator, so I'm not exactly sure the specs. I have only used it with like facial rigs that were given to me. So I'm not sure. I would assume it can work with any rig because it's a Maya plugin. So really all it's doing is taking data and applying it to controls. I don't think there's anything special about these controls or any sort of setting that needs to be done. But like I said, I'm not a tech guy when it comes to that kind of stuff, so I'm not sure.
No, I think you got it. You hit the nail on the head. And I think when you think about humanoid characters versus stylized characters, it's all dependent. You're out on whatever your creative vision or so like desired outcome is. So, I think that's the answer.
Cool.
One question that I have personally for you is, what's the longest shot you've ever put through a Retargeter?
Gosh, I didn't really. I know at least, like I said, at least 10,000 frames. I don't know if some of them were like 15,000 frames, but well, that was through Sony. So I'm not, through Retargeter. I haven't tried that large of a shot yet. I think the largest one I've done is for Retargeter is maybe like 3,000. And you can also, what I forgot to mention was you can do it in sections. So you can set up frame ranges if you want, so that because there might be times in the video where the person's facing the other way and you don't want Retargeter to work during that time. So you can have those frames off so Retargeter won't try to fill in those frames. And then you set another frame range for where it turns on. And you can set that up in Analyzer too. where it's just like it's only going to work during these frame ranges. And that helps a lot also with the time it takes to hit retarget, so that you're not sitting there waiting for such a large shot to be retargeted. But yeah.
Very cool. Well, we're just about at an hour, Tom, and I do want to make sure that that we make sure to get get all your plugs in and to kind of chat through what's happening next. Again, this entire VOD will be available on our Faceware Tech YouTube channel. Again, that's Faceware Tech on YouTube. And yeah, Tom, tell us what's going on here. I know cool. I love your Friday Q&As, so.
Oh, nice, thanks. I might have to skip my Friday Q&A tomorrow, or I might make it a little bit later because I'm doing an interview tomorrow. So finding work comes first. But yeah, I'm still working that out. But really, usually on Twitch, if you find me on Twitch, it's Engelhardt Animation. You see down here, Engelhardt Animation on Twitch. Usually Friday mornings at 7 a.m. I will do a live Q&A. Lately, it's been kind of letting people just pop up and share a sync sketch link, and I'll just go through their shot, and so whoever shows up might get some free feedback that way. I also offer like half-hour sessions with people if they need help with anything. If they want feedback on a shot, maybe you want to learn Retargeter and you want just a half-hour lesson online. That's available too. I do like half-hour for $50, which is a pretty good deal. So you can just email me at tom@engelhardtcreative.com. But yeah, these are all my socials here: LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm going to start getting back into doing some regular posts again. I kind of had to take some time off, mainly because things just started to happen in life. Someone stole money from my bank account. I got laid off from my job. All this stuff. It's just life happens, and so I just I'm like, okay, you got to prioritize. I'm going to focus on my life right now, and then I'll get back to making those posts soon. But yeah, if you ever just have any questions, just feel free to reach out to me on my email, tom@engelhardtcreative.com, and I'll try to help you out, or message me on any of these socials.
Awesome, Tom. Well, thank you so much for being so generous with your time, not only with the webinar, but with the entire community. That's why we love having you as a part of our Faceware Creator Network. And thank you to all the attendees that joined. Please feel free to reach out to Tom directly or follow us at Faceware Tech on all of our socials as well. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.